How would you tell your dog that he or she should just not do something? In today's episode of A Dog's Soul, an Empath's Guide to Your Dog's Feelings, we talk about Boots, a little Staffordshire Terrier, a youngster who tried to eat everything off the ground and started lunging, barking, and growling whenever he saw another dog. And the typical leave it and no did not really work. So we will look at alternatives and why it didn't work. So stay tuned and have fun. Alright, so of course, Boots' mom did what is very common for those kinds of issues, right? If your dog is eating everything off the ground and starts lunging, barking, growling at other dogs or people or whatever, a lot of the time you will get the recommendation to train a leave it or a no. And that just tells the dog that he or she should stop doing whatever they're doing, right? The problem with that is that it doesn't give your dog any alternatives. And your dog will either not care for the cue because it's not rewarding, or your dog will obey because he or she is afraid of the consequences, because there were negative consequences whenever your dog didn't listen. For Boots, his mom didn't want to do anything that hurt him or scared him or whatever. And her first trainer, as well as the Facebook group she was in and got that recommendation from, advised her to use leash corrections, to spray him with water, or even use e-collar. So the thing is, all of these things were forbidden in her country, and rightfully so, if I might add, because they inflict pain and fear in the dog, and that's not a way of living with our companions, living with our best friends, and it would damage the relationship. Also, it's not that reliable, because even if the dog is afraid of consequences, if the fear is not that intense, as soon as your dog feels like he or she isn't watched, they will try it again. So that's another disadvantage of working like that. So Boots still ate everything off the ground and also still barked at other dogs. What we did, of course, first was take care of the stress level. Boots was a young dog and a terrier. He was 11 months old, so puberty was raging inside his brain, and the biting into everything is a little bit typical for terriers and a lot typical for stressed dogs. So with getting the stress level down, we decreased his interest in objects he could bite into already a little bit. So he was still interested in like food and poop, not dog's poop, but cats and some game animals and the occasional tissue. But he would no longer bite into inedible things. Alright? So this was the first win. The second huge part is to prevent the dog from doing whatever we don't want. In Boots' case, eating stuff and barking at other dogs. So for the eating stuff, we introduced a muzzle, a well-fitting muzzle. And I know it's a little bit of a hot topic right now because of the breed restrictions that are spreading, but a well-fitting muzzle, and that means the dog has enough space to actually yawn without the muzzle slipping too much, and the muzzle is short enough and long enough so it doesn't chafe anywhere, it doesn't slip into the eyes when the dog's sniffing, it doesn't press on the nose, and all those things. So yes, it's a little bit annoying to find the right muzzle because it can be a bit of a challenge depending on the dog, but it's definitely worth it because every dog should know a muzzle. You'll never know when you need one. It can be, for example, in some countries, you need a muzzle if your dog needs to ride in a taxi, and you'll never know when your car might not be functioning and you need to get your dog from A to B and you need to use a taxi. Anyway, of course, a muzzle can be an awesome protection against your dog eating dangerous stuff. So this was a necessary step for that part. Of course, until the muzzle was well trained, Boots and his mom chose to walk in areas where there weren't any dangerous things to eat. He could still eat poop, but there weren't any poison things or stuff like that. And also that gave them an opportunity to do decompression walks, which again helped with Boots' reactivity. So in the area where he couldn't find a lot to eat, he could also not find other dogs. So they could just relax and do things together that were fun, and also introduce games and things that provided Boots with an option of fulfilling his needs. That again is something that decreases the stress level, so it's always a good idea to look out for options to fulfill a dog's needs. For Boots, that was running off leash. He loved to run around, he loved to play in the snow, he loved sniffing games, every kind of sniffing games. That was also a part of why he was eating everything, especially poop. And they did a fecal profile with their vet and addressed that with a specific treatment, which also helped. So there is always an option of looking at things medically as well. It's always a good idea to rule that out. And again, that made the situation a lot better. He actually stopped eating poop after that, except for cat's poop. That just seems like a delicacy for dogs. So yeah. But Boots' mom decided that she was okay with that as long as he didn't eat any dangerous things off the ground and stuff like that. So we did also start to train for that. We started to train on alert behavior, so Boots could actually alert whenever he found something to eat, so his mom could check it out and either provide something else for him to eat. Again, we are fulfilling a need in that situation, or allow him to eat whatever he had found if that thing was okay. That's not the first step in training, however, because the first step in training had been that he learned to drop things he already had in his mouth, because let's be honest, if we just reach into the mouth and take out whatever the dog has in there, it's very aversive. It's very uncomfortable for the dog, and we can lose trust pretty quickly that way. So it's easier if the dog learns that spitting out stuff he already has in his mouth gets him a huge, awesome reward. And what we also did, and that was beneficial for the reactivity as well, was to teach him a really, really, really reliable look. It's kind of the immediate substitute for the know or leave it, because know or leave it has no alternative behavior. It doesn't tell the dog what to do instead of what we don't want. With a look cue, we teach the dog to just look at us. And that also interrupts the behavior we don't want, and it gives the dog an alternative. Again, it has to be rewarded very highly, because whenever Boots started barking at the other dog, he showed that he was uncomfortable with the situation he found himself in, right? and the barking gave him an outlet for that. So what our look cue had to provide him with was an outlet. And for him, the most awesome reward was that he could run up to the other dog and greet the other dog. So he was just barking out of frustration. He was very friendly with other dogs. He was great with them. It doesn't matter if big or small. He would absolutely be awesome with them. So we used that as a reward. Boots' mom trained with dogs Boots already knew and liked, and she knew the owners, so they just made appointments for training, and that was a great opportunity to work on that. So they were far enough apart so that Boots would not bark at the other dog, and she would use her look cue, and sometimes they would do stuff together as a reward. Sometimes Boots would get to just run up to the other dog off leash. And with that, they could just decrease the distance more and more, and it was awesome for Boots. He learned that pretty quickly. And for the food he found on the ground, it was also not that hard to teach him that whenever he would look at mom, he would either get the thing or he would get something better. In the beginning, it kind of has to be something better, and that's the tricky part. Because if your dog finds something extremely delicious, on one hand, it's hard to find something better that you already have on hand. Also, things the dogs find seem to be higher value than things they can get from us, which is a little bit of a disadvantage. So they staged the situations. Boots' mom prepared things he could find, and then they worked on that until it was really reliable. And after all that, we started with the alerting thing. I was just stare at the thing. He didn't have to sit down or lie down because whenever it was wet or cold out, Boots didn't like to lie down or sit down. He was a staffy, so very short, no undercoat fur. And for those dogs, it's really tricky to do those things. So staring at the food was a lot easier for him and therefore trained faster. That's why we used that. And after that, it was just introducing different rewards and teaching him that he could also walk in curves when it came to other dogs, and that was fun. It came to playing with his mom as an alternative because that was fun as well. And he also learned that sniffing was a good idea as well. It was polite, right? It's polite toward the other dog, and it's also a fun game. So those things helped him get through meeting other dogs as well. So overall, we had two problems that seemed to be very different, right? Very disconnected from each other. And still the training was very much connected. We could use a lot for both. Stress reduction, like it is so often, helps with a lot of problem behaviors, and for him as well, especially young dogs benefit so much from stress reduction. We always underestimate that, but brain development is actually pretty exhausting. It's when the body needs a lot of rest, a lot of sleep, and a lot of relaxation. So that is always a good idea. And then the cues, as well as the different behaviors and rewards and all the things we did for one thing, we could also use for another. And that is also very typical. Yes, some things we only need in one situation, like the alert behavior on things that Boots could find to eat. But even though that's not something that we could use for a lot of different things, if you think about it, we could also use the alert behavior whenever Boots saw another dog. We didn't do this in this case, but it could be done. And of course, alert behaviors can also be super fun in nosework games. So again, it has multiple functions. So yes, sometimes it seems like we have to train a lot for getting rid of a specific behavior, and that might seem a little bit much. But first of all, training is fun, right? It's a fun activity with your dog. It strengthens the bond, it strengthens your relationship if it's done nicely. So, training just for the sake of training can also be just a good idea. And you might never know where you will need it again. So, training new stuff is never wasted. It keeps your dog interested in doing things with you, it keeps your dog active in the brain, in the mind, and that prevents, again, dementia and stuff like that. So, training, if it's done in a nice way and has enough breaks and relaxation in between, is always a good idea. So, why don't you let me know in the comments or via email, depending on where you're listening to this, what the last thing you trained with your dog was and where you needed it again. And if you have any questions, let me know and I'll see to it that it gets put into the podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe, share the episode so many more people can find the podcast and help their dogs with whatever they're struggling in their day-to-day life. Have fun training, and we'll see each other next time. Bye!